Welcome back to the None of Our Businesses podcast, where we talk about the issues that really matter when it comes to running a successful enterprise. This is the weekly YouTube show and podcast where we talk about issues from an accountant's perspective and news articles, and not just one accountant, but 5 accountants. I'm AJ Wheeler, and with me as always is Charlie Zigman.
Hi, everybody.
Mark Pallardy.
Hey.
Jack DiMatteo. And Ty Carr. Anyway, this week we got some good articles for you. Our first one up is longer hours due to working from home. More lawsuits because of COVID. More CFO departures because of COVID. We're just COVID heavy this week. Product placement and bond films being delayed because of COVID. It's a COVID week. What can I say? Food production plant closure due to a move to Mexico. Gamestop short-term taxes. And what happens when grandma sues her grandsons over investments made? Anyway, starting us off this week is Jack. What article do you got for us there, Jack?
Well, good evening, everybody. We have an interesting one here that I think is going to resonate with pretty much everybody on here and a lot of people that are out there in the workforce. It's talking about, since the advent of COVID and all these people working at home, that people, oddball things that employers never really trusted people to work at home. But the irony is that people working at home are putting in more hours than they ever did before. I've talked to several colleagues in several industries, and I get the same answer. And I know it's absolutely true of me. And wanted to see what the group thought about that.
Yeah, I would say it's been, it's one of those surprising things because you get rid of the commute. And so you think you're going to have more time in your day, but then it does tend to be that because work is so accessible, it's kind of always there. It's not this big, 2 hours away, shower, getting dressed, all these things need to happen. It's just there. And so I think managing that separation has been a little bit tricky, but at the same time, of course, I'm, happy to have the opportunity to have that work available because I know that not everybody's in that scenario. But yeah, that's how I feel. But I think just accessibility has been a big factor there.
When I think we've talked about this on the podcast before, but I think, like my commute is down the hall. So, I mean, it's very easy for me to get done with dinner and be like, oh, I can get one more thing done, just one more thing. Or on the weekend, like I'm not doing anything but laying on the couch. Oh, I can go reconcile that one account, or I can go look at, I can catch up on those marketing emails or whatever it is, related to work. What I find, and I think the reason why everybody is like, feels like they're working more is, and we've said this before on the podcast, is during a normal workflow or normal work day, your work itself was kind of broken up between that commute. You'd get together with friends for lunch and kind of sit down and have that conversation and that like friendly back and forth between coworkers, or, you had a break, a mandatory break. For instance, if you're in, accounting, they'd, lengthen your chain to your desk by 2 feet and let you walk around for 10 minutes, but you don't have those kind of breakups of work. So you're just constantly kind of working. There's no, I guess the only breakup would be like in the workday would be like a Zoom call or something. And, I often find people drifting to another screen and hear them typing while they're on a meeting or something. So often they're trying to do 2 things at once sometimes. So I think it's just the fact that, you don't have those kind of like breakups in the middle of the day that make it seem like I got a lot accomplished, but I was only really working for like 6 of the 8 hours or something like that. Whereas now, it doesn't cost you anything to stay at work an extra hour because, you walk down the hall. So I think, that's, I think, is what missing is that, the routineness of, logging on, punching the keyboard and just, grinding out work, as opposed to when you had those kind of small breaks during the day to like break up the monotony.
Yeah, I've got a theory and a proposed solution if my theory is correct, but I'm not sure if my theory is correct because I think I'm a bit unusual in this way, and that is that I calendar everything in my day. I calendar the time that I'm sleeping. I calendar my dinner time. I calendar the time that I'm going to go for a walk. I calendar the time that I'm going to spend in the garden. And so for me, it's like, well, I know it doesn't matter where my rear end happens to be when it comes to work or not work. I know what's next on my calendar. And what I suspect is most people aren't really like that, in the sense that they go to work, and then normally when they're done with work, they come home, and that time isn't necessarily scheduled. And so I think, the theory that I'm putting forth here is that what this is exposing is that a lot of people, their free time, go figure, isn't really scheduled. It's free time. And then when their work is right in front of them during their free time, it just becomes this thing where it's like, okay, well, I guess I'll just do work because it happens to be here, right? Because they haven't really thought through ahead of time what else they would be doing with that time. And so if my theory is at all correct, then the solution would be more like me. Put it in your calendar that you're going to go for a walk or go do workout, or that you're going to have dinner or spend time with your wife and kids or your spouse or whoever, and your time off on that, so that you've got that blocked out, that you have that kind of reminder that no, that isn't time to just spend doing more work because you didn't think ahead of time what you were going to do with that time. So yeah, I don't know what you guys think about my suggestion or theory on that.
I'm waiting for the webinar, Ty, where you come and teach us all your time management techniques. I'd buy into that one for sure. I know for me personally, I kind of play a mental game with myself where I'm like, oh, it's Monday. I'll work extra long today so that I'll have extra time on Friday with all those extra hours, and I can have a relaxing week, maybe even a 4-day week. And then Friday rolls around and you've worked all those extra hours and there's still a ton to do. So I think actually blocking out the time, at least for me, there doesn't ever seem to be a shortage of the next project, the next thing that needs to be done. So I think just pacing yourself and managing expectations is key. Managing expectations for those who are receiving your work product and letting people know, yeah, this is how much I can get done in a week. And this is how long this is going to take. So I'm sorry, I can't get that item to you by tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. So that's my thought.
And I think I'd just like to put this out here. We're really looking at this from almost like a self-employment or a self-driven kind of, we're pretty flat hierarchical at TCA. But I think if you're working, say you are in public accounting and you're like a staff accountant or a senior, it all rolls downhill essentially. So especially working from home, you might be expected to turn around and work at 8, you might get a Slack message at 7:30 that, that reconciliation or work paper needs to be fixed and done by tomorrow morning or else. And you have no choice but to log on at 11 o'clock at night and do that, or cut your evening short, watching WandaVision and go back upstairs and start, working on that work paper. So I think it's different for everybody, but I think Ty's right in that, like, even in that situation, you should probably schedule your time to be like offline, I think we're, especially now with all, this whole telecommuting and working from home thing, you have to make the time to turn off. When I'm done with work for the day, I cut Slack out. It's always on, and I have to physically go into my tray and turn it off so that I don't sit there and, kind of ponder on something that came through at 9 p.m. or something, So I think I'm not as hardcore as Ty in scheduling an hour walk or, dinner or sleep time, but definitely I try to, okay, work time is over. It's fun time now. And you disconnect electronically to make that happen, because I just know me, if I see that message at 9 and I have the ability to do something about it, I'm just going to want to take care of it. So,
AJ, I think you hit on the head. There was something very important what you talked about when you don't have a commute anymore. And I used to have a client that was 2 miles from my house, and it was years of working for him. And I kind of missed having a commute because that's your daily chance. There's almost a built-in chance to decompress or catch up on phone calls, because you get people that want to call you on the phone and you're always busy doing something else. Well, when you're stuck in the car, what else can you do? But I think that's where that makes this a lot more fatiguing, is because you don't have that built-in decompression on a daily basis. And it just seems like you're always working, which hence you are, because you're at home and you never leave. How about you, Charlie? What do you have for us this week?
Yeah, so I've got another article, but I just want to say before we jump into that really resonates with me, because I have commuted into a major city from a suburb for many years. And so for the whole time that I've done that, people have kind of in that city have been like, amazed that I'm willing to commute every day. But for all those same reasons that you're saying, it's just like, that was the piece. That was the best part of my day a lot of days, because it's just calm. You get to listen to whatever you're going to listen to, and nobody's, there's no distractions. So yeah, I think that's a really good point. I found an article in HR Dive called "Nearly a Year into the Pandemic, Employers Brace for Coronavirus Lawsuits," attorneys say. So just to kind of set the backstory, of course, we're here in the middle of this pandemic, and employers have always had this common law duty to keep the employees safe. And what the fear is that a bunch of employees are going to try to say that their bosses didn't do all the right things to keep them safe from this pandemic. And so the article takes a look at how maybe those cases might play out and talk about kind of what employers can do to protect themselves from these types of things. And so it said that basically in the first round of legislation that was put out for coronavirus, there was a federal liability shield in place, but there was one proposed, but that didn't actually become part of the law. And so it became a state level issue to determine whether or not there was going to be a liability shield for employers from these type of claims. And the lawyers that are discussing it in the article are talking about the EPLI, the Employer Practices Liability Insurance, and workers' comp, and all these other things may be what businesses use to kind of protect themselves from this sort of thing, but that ultimately those things aren't designed to handle this issue. And so they often fall short of what they're kind of put in place to protect. And so I guess I wanted to just kind of bounce this off of you guys and see if you had any advice for maybe business owners who are concerned about their potential liability, or if you think maybe this is just lawyers kind of trying to, get everybody excited about lawyer services in this new coronavirus world we live in. What do you guys think?
Oh, I think it's a real thing, a real consideration as an employer. Even, the thing is, our firm, for example, we've got a good group of people. We're all friends. I don't run around worried that an employee is going to sue me kind of thing, or sue the firm and a general thing. But, this COVID thing, right? People die. That's a pretty serious life event. I think all bets are off the table when stuff like that happens. I guess I would say to my fellow business owners out there and operators is, don't count on anything. Don't count on the fact that you have a great company culture. Don't count on everyone's friends. Don't count on, that people understand that you did the best you could. I think the only thing you can really, the main thing that you can do is stay with the pack, right? Do what is considered reasonable under the circumstances by most businesses, which includes following the law in your local jurisdiction. I think obviously if under your state or city or county jurisdiction, you're not supposed to be open as a business, then you are putting yourself at risk by opening as a business for sure. But I would say following the law is like the minimum standard. If the law allows you to open, but everyone else in your industry or business or most are not opening, you're kind of risking yourself by doing something that the rest of the pack isn't doing on that front. And I feel for fellow business owners who probably hear me say that and say, well, it's either that or I go out of business. Yeah, maybe I get it. Yeah. And so as long as you've got those risks in mind and you're not being, as they say, Pollyannish about your risks, your relative risks there, that you're not understating what your risks are for not staying with the pack and not following the law.
This one's going to be kind of interesting because they're going to this has got the potential to be a real Pandora's box, because you almost wonder what's this going to do to insurance rates at some point. If you start getting some court cases and people sue successfully, this is going to make insurance rates go through the roof. But following up on what Ty was saying, I would think at a minimum it would be a good idea to get a formal COVID policy, based on whatever local or federal guidelines are available, and then actually work that policy. If somebody is positive and they say quarantine for 14 days, or you need to disinfect, that area, and people can't come back in for 24 hours. So I think it would be well advised to have a formal written plan based on those guidelines, and then actually enforce and work that plan.
I 100% agree, Jack. I think this piece I wanted to speak to is the liability shield, because a lot of businesses have clamored for that, and that has kind of been a piece that has been dangled out before some of these legislative movements that have happened in Congress. But that's tricky too, because if you give everybody a blank liability shield and you have some companies that egregiously abuse that shield and require all the workers in a pork processing plant to show up, and they know they're protected from any liability, and then people start getting COVID, it becomes a real issue. So I think coming at this from doing what best practices in your industry are, you know, having a set of rules and guidelines that you are maintaining and following, and then basically crossing your fingers and hoping like heck that nothing happens to your employees. I don't know that there's much else that you can do.
Well, and I think it's important to mention that in the proposed, even in the proposed liability shields that they put out, they mentioned that, willful ignorance to the law or to the rules was not covered by that liability shield. And so if you're just ignoring it and doing whatever you want, then, shouldn't work. The only other thing I wanted to share on the article was one of my favorite lines in there. It said, there is a vaccine out, but there's no vaccine for this new wave of litigation that's coming. And so I got a kick out of that. All right, AJ, do you have another article we can talk about?
Yeah, for sure. So my article comes from Accounting Web, and it's titled "How Accountants Can Become Better Marketing Experts." So I was kind of expecting this article to kind of go chew through like, the normal post on social media, start a podcast or something like that. But apparently this managing partner at a Hinge Marketing did a research on this becoming a visible expert. Essentially what a visible expert is an area of expertise that somebody demonstrates through, different means. And so I was kind of surprised at achieving visibility and bringing in new prospects. They kind of stack ranked it as what works and what doesn't work. So what they say is the best marketing tools for reaching prospects are speaking engagements, business book writing, and search engine optimization, believe it or not. And the ones that they say didn't work that rated low for impact were social media, networking events, and trade associations. And I found this surprising because we've kind of made a push with TCA, at least, for us to be, kind of on the forefront of doing a podcast like this, being in not a trade association, but part of Chamber of Commerce that has paid off for us. We've been, to networking events, and that's not, prospective prospects, I guess, networking events, but networking events with other CPA firms that, do audit and tax that we would be, basically a good fit with their clients and, would be a good recommendation to them. And then, we've leveraged, the ancillary kind of professionals like lawyers and such to also provide us with, referrals. So I was just kind of a little bit surprised, I guess, at the, the outcome and what they're suggesting is a good, I guess, a good response or, reaching prospects as speaking engagements, business book writing, and search engine optimization. So I'd like your guys' take. Do you guys think maybe that this is just a skewed marketing, I guess, or if they're trying to sell a product, or maybe, through reading through this, maybe it's making sense, I guess, what he's saying.
I mean, I think those three things I do think are good things for developing. We refer to it as becoming kind of individual thought leaders and personal brands, and I think it's kind of the same. It's that same topic, and it's like, well, how do you get it so that the public is aware of your expertise? I think three things he cites are cool. I think this article is interesting. I mean, and I'm taking note of kind of the criticism of some of the things that we classically use, like social media, like you said. I don't know. I do think I can't remember who it was, but I remember the business book writing is something that I wanted to do that I haven't put the time into yet. But I remember somebody saying that, they give out books like they give out their business card, because when you show up and, somebody's asking for your business card, instead of giving them a business card, you hand them your book. I mean, think about how powerful that is, and I think that's, and I always thought, I was like, yeah, that'd be pretty impactful to be like, somebody asks for your card and you're like, here's my book on finance for small businesses, or here's my book on how to handle the taxes for an LLC or whatever, right? I mean, I think that that would be an amazing and powerful marketing tool to have things like that in hand. So I think the thing, like I said, the three things he's citing, I would say, yeah, I mean, it seems like those are right. Whether the other ones don't work or are less impactful, I don't have that expertise to say. So I'm taking note of what they're saying here.
You know, it's funny. There's a great read. It's been out in like 3 or 4 revisions, and it's called Guerrilla Marketing. And the thing that they really stress in there is, you know what, all of these things work to some degree, and that's the truth of the matter. You've got to pick the 8, 9, 10, 12, whatever email campaign, search engine optimization, joining trade associations, joining BNI, doing some networking, because it's very frustrating when you put a lot of effort into these things and they don't work. Because you imagine writing a book, spending all the time to write a book, and then that doesn't work. But really what they stress in this guerrilla marketing is you've got to do all these things, because in some varying degree or at some level, they all work. If you do too much of one or you stop doing one, you're really not going to know it. You just kind of got to keep that saturation going in multiple channels.
I think one of the things that we've kind of tried to do with the podcast, or at least when Charlie and Ty and I first started doing the podcast, was we tried to multitask with it. And I'll explain what I mean. By multitask, I meant that we tried to pick articles and talk about things on the podcast that would not just serve for marketing purposes, but also, and not just serve to let us spout our expertise on certain items, but also to probe questions and kind of expand our knowledge base and talk about things with a group that we would want to talk about anyway. And so I think when you double dip on these things, for instance, Jack mentioned writing a book and then that doesn't work out to get prospects. I would say that if you're writing a book just to get prospects as a marketing tool, that's probably not the best use of your time, and you're not going to write the best book. But if you're writing a book to like essentially double check yourself and really double down on that piece of accounting or whatever it is to be a subject matter expert in, and you really take the time to delve deep into that subject, you're not just providing yourself with a marketing platform and showing yourself as being what these people call a VE, a visible expert, or what we call a content matter, person. But you're also then solidifying the fact that you know what you're talking about, you have proof of it in written form, and then it can be used as a marketing tool. So I would always stress that if you're trying to do some of these marketing techniques, you mix in business, the business development side with it, with personal growth, with learning more, being able to discuss these subjects with you guys. I learn a lot from everybody here. And I think it's really beneficial to expanding my knowledge as an accountant and as a person. And it's not just a marketing ploy, I think. So I think if you narrowly define these activities as marketing, activities, you can kind of get caught in that trap of like, well, I've been posting on social media every day for 2 years and I haven't gotten one person to email me back to be a prospective client. You don't necessarily know if people that you have engaged to, in a different way haven't looked up your social media and was like, wow, he really knows his stuff regarding nonprofits or regarding how to, value a business or how to run tasks. So I think it all plays in a bit, and you're not going to, you can't maybe trace back all of our prospects that we've closed, quote unquote, closed deals with and single it out. Oh, they came to us because of the podcast or because of whatever it was. But it's that extra, I guess, frosting on top of the cake. Hey, I got a good referral from my buddy that is my CPA and does my taxes. Do these people really know what they're talking about? And then they come and look at the podcast, or they come and look at one of Ty's articles, or they come and look at anything that we do, and they're like, wow, that bolsters kind of your subject matter expertise in that area. So I guess I'm going long here, but I think my point is that like to make sure that you're doing this not just for a marketing ploy, but to like further yourself and your own career and make it visible to everybody.
I think that's exactly right. And I just want to expand on a little bit and just put it in maybe another way, but to say that it has to be, you have to pick the type of marketing that you enjoy. So for example, if you enjoy going to networking events and talking to people, then that's what you want to do. If you think that if you enjoy design and your website is the driver of that, then that's where you put your efforts. But if you try to go do a public speaking engagement and then you just hate public speaking, then that's not going to work. And so I think a lot of this is finding which marketing efforts happen to align with the things that you already enjoy, and then honing in on those ones is just going to have the best bang for your buck.
And just to put a cherry on top of this conversation, I agree with everything that's been said here, but I think also when you think about writing a book or having a speaking engagement, these are not activities that you can do quite as regularly as you can to just have a social media presence or to be part of a trade network. It's like, how many speaking engagements am I going to have per year that I need to actively market myself that's taking away from the other work that I need to be doing? It takes quite a bit of time, and who knows? I mean, if everybody decided to be a speaker, would there even be that many positions? If everybody writes a book, who's going to read all these books? You know, so I think even though some of the other tools might have less quote unquote bang for your buck, they have longevity, and you know, optimizing your SEO certainly can as well. But I think, you know, I don't know. Maybe I'm just not a big fan of public speaking, so I'll defer to that train of thought.
You're doing it pretty good right now. Just want to say.
All right. Hey, rousing discussion about that social media stuff, huh, guys? Mark, you got another article for us?
Yeah, sure do. From Accounting Today, there's an article called "COVID-19 Pressures Force CFOs to Step Down." And you know, as I was going into this, I was thinking, of course, you know, businesses are shrinking. Some CFOs might lose their job as a result. But this article kind of moves into a different tack, which I think was interesting. I'm going to just quote from the article. The pandemic highlighted a need for better risk management and crisis management, and it's shaken a lot of people out of their comfort zones and exposed a lot of weaknesses. When the economy is roaring and stock prices are high and through the roof, a lot of weaknesses can be forgiven. But then when something like the pandemic comes along, those who don't know, who come along with solutions know what to do, but those who can't problem solve are going to have a big problem. So I think this is interesting because I guess there's been a turnover of the S&P 500 of like 37% of their CFOs of late, and a lot of this is because they were doing great when everything was great, but yet when times got tough, they didn't have the creative solutions and the creative strategies to work through the pandemic and some of the interesting intricacies it brought. So I was curious what you guys thought about this.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that everybody, it's just easier when times are easy, and I think that, you know, when things start to get hard, it really takes the people who actually want to be in that position and, you know, forces them to shine. And I think it's just a big test of everyone's commitment to that role. And yeah, I think this is kind of a natural side effect of going through tough times in any industry, and we're seeing it highlighted in the CFO industry. But I think this is probably something that's true in a lot of different fields.
Well, and I would say a lot of like the companies that they're listing are large, you know, publicly traded companies that they're really talking about. And I mean, in the age of COVID, and I guess the age of the stock market we're in now, everybody's very much short-term focused. And so if you're looking at the short term for like car purchases, like they mentioned GM in here, or Delta Airlines, or, you know, all the, you know, these various Ford, who's got this disposable income, I guess, to buy new cars during the pandemic when nobody's driving, or, you know, airlines, you know, moving. So if you're posting a loss or your company's tanked, you know, and you're a CFO, I mean, that's, you know, it's no fault of your own, but, you know, I guess recency bias or whatever you want to talk about, what have you done for me lately, kind of is, you know, is the modus operandum for these large S&P 500 stock market public companies. And if that's not working, they're going to bring in somebody else that they think can turn it, quote unquote, turn it around, when in fact it may be no fault of that CFO of their own. It may just be market conditions that are causing, you know, I guess a negative trend for that year, or, you know, the COVID itself causing, like I said, airlines, GM, Ford, you know, all these things. It may not be a product of what's going on from a financial standpoint, financial planning or financial results, you know, of operations. But at the end of the day, you know, in those kind of things, it rolls uphill almost. You know, you're responsible for everybody underneath, and you're responsible for the bottom line, and you have CFO after your name. You know, I guess it's not surprising, I guess, right? Like in this short term, stock market turnaround stuff that these companies, the short-term profit kind of thing that these companies face.
Face it, man. The last year has just put people under pressure that they probably haven't been in at any time in their lifetime, and hopefully will never experience again. So, you're a CFO, you're in a leadership role. There's a lot of pressure, and a lot of people just, I didn't sign up for this. It's too much for me. I want out. You got to look at it the same way with these small business owners, 25, 30 years. I mean, it's part and parcel of the entire population. You've got a lot of people that are experiencing pressure to, from external forces that they really don't have any control over, and some people are just gonna, if they're able to do so, they're just gonna check out.
Yeah, I think that's what I was kind of thinking as I was kind of noodling on this, and not trying to overinterpret the data either. I mean, it's a large percentage, and yet it's a small. I think the article starts with 37 CFOs resigned in 2020, which is a 27.6% increase, but 37 is still a relatively small population to be drawing too many inferences from, it seems like. And that's thinking about that point. It's like, yeah, cynically you could say, building on what Jack was saying, it makes me wonder, well, are people really are these smart folks who are just arbitraging the balance of life and pay? And they're like, yeah, this job just got a crap load harder. I'm out of here. Why would I do that? Right. And I think, yeah, there definitely could be that. But again, I don't think the data gives us enough to know.
Well, and you kind of took the words right out of my mouth, because, I mean, you talk about if you're a CFO of like GM, HP, or Delta Airlines, you're making pretty good coin. I mean, I don't know what your spending habits are like, but hey, man, you probably have a nice severance package and some company stock you can cash in. I doubt you're hurting if you resign or are let go from a position like that, I guess. As opposed to like if you're a manager, a shift manager at Domino's or, a shoe store or something, I guess, so.
Yeah, 3 cheers for the golden parachute. Charlie, you got another article for us?
Yeah, I do. All right, so in The Verge, there's an article called "Bond Film Delays Are Reportedly Causing Product Placement Havoc for Brands." And so what the article looks at is that apparently the new Bond movie has taken a year longer to make than what its original schedule was. And so now all these different brands who have engaged in these kind of agreements to have their products highlighted in that movie, like Adidas and Nokia and a couple of others, are now finding that the things that they paid to have be highlighted are not relevant anymore. They're a year old. And so they've stuck in these agreements that they don't really want. And so I just thought it was really interesting because product placement is a thing, of course, but I guess I didn't really think about what the delay in a movie could then mean to a bunch of advertising companies. But it, kind of leads me to my question. I mean, if James Bond doesn't show us, how to dress and what to love, how are we all supposed to know what to wear? What do you guys think? How are you guys going to pick out your shoes next year if the James Bond movie doesn't come out in time?
Yeah, I'm not changing, I guess, my wardrobe because of Bond. If you're a viewer of this podcast, I'm not high fashion, but but I think it is. I think it speaks to how disposable, really expensive things are. Like when we talk about phones, if anybody's purchased like a flagship phone lately, I mean, you're talking $1,000 easy, which, by the way, is every menu item on the Cracker Barrel menu. I mean, let's use our head, people. You can either eat everything at Cracker Barrel or you can have an iPhone 10. But I mean, realistically, if those things are going, I guess, obsolete or not being the coolest thing on the block for, within the matter of 6 months to a year, like it's a really high turnover rate. And if you look at I guess, and zeroing in on technology, how much more are you getting for your money? In the span of a year? Is the iPhone 11 really that much better than the iPhone 10? I don't know. I don't think so, but and so I think product placement is a funny thing, right? Because you're paying for your advertisement to be slid into the movie, right? Have the shot of the nice car from the front with the badge and emblem on it. So everybody's like, wow, the James Bond car, I have to have it. But just like we said in the last segment, how many people are buying, brand new cars based on a Bond movie or something? So I guess, CGI is amazing. I guess if they wanted to put the new model in of the iPhone, scratch out the 10 and put in an 11 next to the iPhone or whatever it is that the product placement is, CGI can do it. So I don't know. I guess here's the smallest violin playing for all those product placements for the big ad companies. I mean, I'm not crying because, the iPhone 11 was replaced by the iPhone 10 was replaced by the 11 in the Bond movie, I guess.
Well, to be clear, it wasn't the iPhone, it was a Nokia phone. But the Bond films are actually known for being very technology forward. And I'm going to play the other side of the fence. If I'm a company who is advertising in one of the most technologically forward film franchises, this isn't Look Who's Talking 2. This is James Bond. You want the latest gadgets. It has a gadget person in the queue is specifically there to show you the latest gadgets and the latest cool things. And even ever since the 60s, the cars that he would drive up in and the stunts that would be performed, it brought a cachet of cool with it. I'm not sure that still holds true to this day, but if you're a company like Nokia and you're paying big bucks to have your latest product and probably even releasing that product 6 months ahead so that you're timing with the release of the movie and the product that's in the movie you can buy on stores today, and then that gets delayed and you have new phones coming out, I could see where they would want to protect against this. I mean, the one way they could have insured against this is to get an insurance bond.
I'm curious, wasn't Nokia one of the Nokia aren't they one of the ones that's on life support with their products? Weren't they one of the ones that was going to be like another one of these Gamestops that they were looking to short? And I'm just kind of wondering because it just kind of dovetails in another story. Maybe it's just, they're looking at these, putting money into a movie to get your advertisement. Look what happened with the Super Bowl, all the big names that pulled out of it this year. It kind of reminds me of Radio Shack, who was on life support several years ago, and they scraped together a ton of money to do a Super Bowl commercial. Obviously, it didn't work because I don't see you out. I don't see you anymore, Radio Shack. But I'm almost wondering. It's kind of, this article didn't talk about that, but with what basically happened to the Super Bowl, and again, Nokia is not the household name it was way back in the earlier days of technology. That's kind of an interesting.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because the article actually mentioned that they brought in the not only was there going to be the new Nokia phone they were releasing, but they also made sure to bring in the old Nokia 3305, which was like that really brick one. And it's funny because it's like a meme, I mean, Nokia has a new phone they're going to show you, but at the same time, in their new James Bond movie, they're going to make sure to bring in this meme of a brick phone from 1990, whatever, and it's just
Charlie, don't you dare talk bad about that Nokia. Let me tell you, that thing could be in a nuclear war and it would survive. You could drop that thing in a pool, drop it in a bag of rice, and it would still work for 3 more years. Don't you talk bad about my Nokia when I forget the model number.
It's true.
Don't blaspheme on this podcast if you say anything false about that Nokia.
If anybody needs a phone like that, it's James Bond because he's getting into all sorts of shenanigans. He needs a brick phone. It makes a lot of sense. So I might go out and buy one. We'll just see when the movie comes out how cool it looks. All right. Do you guys have another article we can talk about?
Interesting article out of Fox out of Atlanta. One of those ones, I don't know. I haven't really recalled seeing a whole lot of plant closings and, jobs moving to Mexico lately, but this one kind of hits that home again. I mean, are we going to see a spike in that? What was kind of surprising for me is they were talking about these unionized jobs being $50,000 to $150,000 a year, which I don't know, for an area of the country that's not exactly associated with high costs. I thought, those are some pretty good jobs and the kind of jobs you're going to raise families on and mortgages. But if you want to look at the other side of the coin, is this another case where the union might have just priced themselves? They're not competitive enough. Seems like this company has a history of closing plants and moving jobs to Mexico, but this is 400 very high-paying jobs, which is going to leave a hole in that general community. And hopefully, this isn't the shape of more things to come. What do you guys think about this?
Well, I think, unions aside, I mean, it's always a business decision on these fronts. I mean, I worked for a manufacturing company that was made in America, and they had their parts made in Mexico, but they would assemble in America so they could have that stamped on the side of their product. But I I think you're going to see it. I think, American manufacturing has, and this is, of course, talking about a food manufacturer, a bakery plant, but American manufacturing has been on a downswing. And I think, and I've read a lot into this, and realistically, we look back with rose-colored glasses back to the 60s, 70s, and 80s when manufacturing was in full swing in America. And the real reason behind that was because of the war, and because of but if you're talking about, like, I guess, access to raw materials, Asia and kind of, Asia major and minor in the East is really close to the raw materials for a lot of these manufacturing. So, they have a strategic advantage over America of being closer to these raw materials. Talking about Mexico and moving jobs down there, it's just the fact that labor is less expensive in that country, and you can get the same product and the same kind of quality for less money. And these are really an economic kind of, I guess, decision. What I think needs to happen is, infrastructure in America needs to come back, and there needs to be an investment to make it viable for an American manufacturing company to set up and tool up and start moving here. And realistically, you talked about being priced out. America's minimum wage and, I guess, wage rate and what people expect for an hour's worth of work is different from other parts of the world. And I guess you can blame a company, but you can't blame them for trying to cut that bottom line and move production somewhere where it's going to be less expensive. So, I mean, it's a push and pull kind of thing. I think, and I think this is the one spot where government can help. If there's incentives to keep American jobs in America, they should push forward, and I think there's probably an opportunity there. Any kind of adverse condition, I think, is an opportunity. And if somebody wants to, you look at like anything that said made in America or has plants, like I think of the what's the car company, the floor mats and the cup holders, they proudly have their commercial saying it's all made in America with American workers and American manufacturing. It's high on the list of viral, I guess, advertising. So it's a weird climate, and like, as much as we want to think, America's isolated, it's a world economy, and it has been for a while, and you have to compete with those lower wages in other countries.
Yeah, I think that's right, AJ. And I also just want to comment, we tried a strategy in the past 4 years of instituting tariffs to kind of keep the jobs at home and to grow the economy. And the numbers just came out this week that while our trade deficit with China shrunk, overall it grew everywhere else. So the overall trade deficit was higher than it has been in prior years. So trying to just play whack-a-mole with trade policies doesn't seem to be the sole solution. I'm not saying it can't be a part of the equation, but it doesn't seem to be the sole solution. And I think building an infrastructure and making America, I guess, super technology heavy, since that many of the stories we hear, we're heading in that direction, so that we can really compete with the rest of the world, and we can create an environment where American companies can create a product that everybody around the world is going to want to buy. I think that is kind of the direction I see us needing to head. And, I'm not sure that we're going in that direction. I'm hoping that we see some infrastructure improvements in the next 4 years. I'm hoping that Congress can work together with the president and get some things working so that middle-class Americans and people who work in manufacturing can really thrive and succeed. I'm skeptical, but who isn't skeptical of Washington, D.C. these days that anything's going to get done?
Yeah, I'm with you. And the only other point I wanted to add on this is just that I think it's interesting to kind of see the mechanic of becoming a union, and how that we usually think of it as something that empowers workers, because obviously in a lot of cases it does, but it adds a new dynamic to the entire to the entire industry, basically, because it puts these employers in these hard spots where if they, the union controls what they're able to do. And so that forces them to consider outsourcing in a way that they maybe wouldn't have if they had a little more bargaining ability here at home. I'm not saying that makes unions good or bad, or that they should or shouldn't use them, but just it's interesting to me to see how the union kind of forced their hand on this issue. And then that then leads to, okay, now we're going to go ahead and head to Mexico, and suddenly the union's not on the table anymore. And so I just thought that was kind of interesting.
No, it's interesting, and I have to be very careful what I say because I live in an area of the country that's probably still heavily unionized and has a big steeped history in unions. But you hit something on the head. I mean, we've had some companies here that are long gone, but everybody used to, everybody will tell the story of how everybody sat on their rear end for 2 hours because only this guy with this class had to walk across 3 factories to change a light bulb because nobody else was able to do it. So in a lot of these circumstances, these unions can be their own worst enemy. If they don't want to work with management and at least relax some of those union rules, I mean, they can price themselves out of jobs. And unfortunately, to AJ's point, it becomes an economic decision. And a lot of times, the union, you can, that's great that you keep the union, but if you price yourself out of a job for everybody, you're hurting the whole population. But Charlie, up again with another article for us this week.
I'm actually fresh out. I've only got the 2, so I'm out. Do you have one we could talk about, AJ?
Yeah, for sure. So this one wouldn't be a week on the podcast recently if we don't talk about GameStop stock. So this article comes from USA Today. So if you made a bundle on GameStop, get ready to pay taxes, right? So this has to do basically what the article is talking about, and I think and the reason why I picked it is I think it highlights kind of the naivety or the naive nature of, I guess, the general public on the tax consequences on short-term versus long-term investments. And so if you bought GameStop stock and you haven't held, and you sold it when it was high, you bought low and sold high like you're supposed to, that was a very short window of time, and you're in for a capital gains hit. I guess it's going to be taxed as a capital gains as opposed to like a long-term investment gain. And so the article kind of walks through the basic rules that I think we all know. If you hold a piece of investment for longer than a year and then you sell it, then you get long-term investment treatment for taxes. But if you hold it less than a year, you get short-term capital gains on it, and it's treated very differently. So I guess it's something I hadn't thought of, and it's something that didn't cross my mind when we talked about the GameStop stock. But I guess people are in for quite a big surprise if they bought it in December at a low and then sold it at the end of January at a high. And, come 2022, they're going to have a tax bill for this large increase in their capital gains. But I'm wondering if this is a surprise. I guess we're all up on short-term versus long-term gains. But if this is something you think that the general public just is naive about or should know, or is this something that, we probably should get the word out on?
I think some of these Redditors don't really understand short-term versus long-term capital gains. I read this and I was like, oh yeah, because short-term capital gains are taxed at your ordinary income rate. And some of these guys might be in college or, making $20,000, $30,000 a year. And then they've just made $250,000 by selling stock. So now it looks like they made $280,000 for the year. They're not getting that long-term rate. And it's, bully for them, but hopefully they've set some money aside for taxes and they're not just spending that money. I mean, you hear the stories, oh, I paid off my college education. Okay, but the tax man's still going to come calling for whatever new tax bracket you're in as a result of that gigantic sale you just did. So thanks for bringing this up, AJ. It actually made me chuckle a little bit.
Congratulations to the one that made it that made a great score. But that's the whole point. I mean, you have to know, you have to understand what you're doing. You go in there, you made $100,000 or $200,000 on that stock. If you want to dance, you got to pay the band. So if you made that kind of money on that stock, put some money away, pay the taxes on it. It's a great score, but don't get in there and blow the money on something else and get to the end of the year and say, geez, I don't have money to pay the tax man. man, that's on you. I mean, it's like it's buyer beware. You have to understand the game you're playing.
Yeah, the other thing I love about this story is that I just like the idea of like this college kid who just like kind of hates the financial system, and so he just he gets on Reddit and he figures out that he can do something to really get back at him, and so he puts his money in, he makes a bunch of money, he takes it all out, and he feels like he's really giving it to the man. And then he files his taxes, and the man is here, basically making sure that he's paying his taxes. And so I think it's going to really do a lot to solidify some of the narratives that the people who are getting into this came into it with, and cause them to further distrust the financial system as a whole, even if that is an ill-conceived notion. But I can just see that happening with people.
Well, I think it's going to be really interesting when you see Wall Street Bets and all these millennials start screaming for a reduced capital gains rate come January 2022. And there's a new millennial super PAC that's lobbying for lower capital gain rates because they're getting screwed by the man come 2022 for their short-term, capital gains tax.
Well, they might find some quite nice bedfellows with the hedge fund managers at that point, because they would love a short-term capital gains rate that matched the long-term one.
All right, Mark, you got another article for us?
Yeah, let's wrap us up today with a kind of amusing anecdote from Accounting Today. Grandma wins $19 million case against JP Morgan and 2 advisors, which happen to be her grandsons. So this is just a tale of caution. If you happen to be, this woman is 94, she's super wealthy, has stakes in DSW, American Eagle, some other big clothing furnitures. And so she had agreed to let 2 of her grandsons trade some securities for her. And what they went ahead and did was create a fake email account, started signing some things on her behalf, started investing in derivatives. Hey, they made her a lot of money, but they also made these trades that made themselves huge commissions, upwards of $4 million. And grandma said, actually the granddaughter found out. So I'm sure this is going to be a fun Thanksgiving this year. But, there's some infighting and there's some fraud going on. And, I don't know. It's a cautionary tale, but I thought it would be kind of an amusing note to end on.
Well, I think this highlights, and Ty was talking about it earlier when we were talking about the COVID kind of, we're all friends here and everything. And if anybody's ever been through a divorce or in the audience has been through a divorce, there's nothing that makes anybody more adversarial than when dollar signs are put in front of somebody. So if you're talking about, if there's money to be made, it doesn't matter if you're family, friends, relatives, blood, lifelong friends. Lawyer's going to find a way to put a dollar sign in front of you that makes you an adversary. So I would just say, it's a cautionary tale for everybody, but I would think, when there's large dollar amounts at stake, anything's on the table at that point. And I think, investment or, the level of wealth that we're talking about here, it doesn't even have to be that. I've seen, families fall apart over an estate worth $50,000, and so I think it highlights the fact that you need things in writing, things in people to understand that when money's involved, you have to have some kind of protection and some kind of a mutual agreement, or at least a memorandum of understanding when you're doing these kind of things, even if it is between family. Just because it's family or kin or anybody else that you're doing business with doesn't mean that if things go sideways, nothing's going to happen. And I think, having something in place, at least, stating what somebody makes or how money is going to be spent or something like that is always advisable. Maybe that's just, my ultra conservative accounting brain speaking, but, just be careful, I guess, in business and in life when it comes to things with dollar signs attached to it, because nothing can turn the tables faster than somebody seeing, a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow dangled by a lawyer,
Yeah, and there's one line in this article in particular that I wanted to call attention to because it kind of upset me in the way that only an article can. It talked about how the two grandsons had actually worked to her advantage over the course of the time that they had been running her account, because she had ended with a 30 million profit, is what they said. And so they said there was some evidence that they were like trying to do the right thing as they went along up until the end. And it just kind of frustrated me, because it's like there's no context to that number. You have no idea, whether or not that's a meaningful amount in relation to how much money was in there. And it also sets the bar of like, well, if you're going to defraud somebody, as long as they're left with a profit, is it then okay? Or how are we, what does that actually mean? And so I think, just to go back to AJ's point, ultimately it boils down to get involved in investments that you understand. And that can be either by you understanding the investment mechanism, or by you actually understanding what trades you're engaging in, by not having someone else who trades on your behalf with automated or not, or fraudulent, really, transactions that you didn't authorize. So I think that's, just a key in life and in investments as well.
Yeah, it's AJ hit it on the head. Yeah, you want to see something, just watch how people battle royal over an estate, and it doesn't even matter how small it is. You'll just see people torn apart. But it doesn't matter with family. And then, like you say, you've got the two grandsons and a granddaughter. Yeah, like you say, should be a real fun Thanksgiving. Thank you for watching this week's broadcast of None of Our Businesses, the weekly YouTube podcast where we take viewers on a journey through various news topics as seen through the eyes of accountants. Hit the like button, give us a max rating, tell your friends, family, and colleagues about us. We'll see you right back here next week with a fresh slate of news items to discuss. Have a great week, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.